Hi, I'm Nicole, writer, producer, and editor here at Critical Crop Top, and this is Tutorial Tuesday. On today's tutorial, we are going to be talking a little bit more about sequences and the timeline panel. Okay, so in our last video, we imported some just standard QuickTime movies into Premiere Pro, and in this tutorial, we're going to talk a little bit more about sequences and the timeline panel. So how do I make my sequence settings the right settings for the footage that I have, and what are tracks? So when I'm working with footage in my timeline panel, what are tracks? How can I manipulate those tracks? Can I add video and audio to different tracks? That sort of thing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about sequences, sequence settings, and all that good stuff. So I've got some footage that I have imported into my project. And we've already sort of talked about how do we play that footage, right? So, of course, if I use my cursor, I can pull that around, and I'm playing it right now in my source monitor. I can use these buttons here. I can use the space bar to stop, to play and to stop.
If you were to take into consideration,
right, and of course I can use JKL.
Here it is. Take into consideration the enormous impact.
Right. Okay. So sequences. I'm going to go ahead and create a bin for my sequences, and again, sequences represent my edited program. So right click, new bin. There we go, and we're going to call it sequences. All right, so once I have a bin, I can go ahead and if I want to open up that bin in a separate tab, I can just double click on the bin, and here we are. So once inside, I can right click, new item, sequence, or I can use the key command for creating a new sequence. And once I do that, I'm going to get this pop-up window that asks me what sequence settings do I want. So I can make these choices right now, or when I drop footage into my timeline using the sequence that I've created, you'll see that it's going to ask me if I want to make it the same settings as my footage. So, but if you know what your settings are going to be, or if you need your settings to be different than your footage in some way, then this is a good place to make those choices. So you can see there's lots of different types. I know that I'm working with DSLR footage, and I know that it was shot at 1080p and 24 frames per second. So let's go ahead and call that sample sequence. Okay. So if I were to go in here, if I go back to my project panel, and I go to my video footage and I grab any one of these clips and I just sort of drag it in there, you'll see that it goes in with no problem. I won't need to render this or anything like that. So if I go back to my sequences bin and we create a different sequence that is not the same settings as our footage. So if we go here and we create a new sequence, and we're going to call this sample sequence different. Oops, actually this is a good lesson. So I actually just created one that is the same settings as the one I just created, but this is a good opportunity to talk about how I can change the settings of my sequence at any time. So I've already created this one and it's meant to be different than this one. So if I click on this and I go up here to sequence settings, you'll see at the top here, I can actually go in and I can change the settings of my sequence at any time. So let's change this just so that it's different. We're going to change it to a different format, and we'll hit OK. All right, so this sequence that says sample sequence different is actually a different type of setting than my video footage. So, and you'll see over here in my timeline, I can tab through either one of these sequences. So we're on sample sequence different. I'm going to go back to my project panel, and I'm going to grab the same clip and drag it into my timeline. So this is where I'm going to get this message this clip does not match the sequence settings. Do you want to change the sequence to match the clip settings? So at this point, if I wasn't sure what to set my sequence to, I can just create a sequence, drag the clip in there, and when it asks me if I want to change it, I can. So if you're not exactly sure what your sequence should be set to in order to match your clip settings, then this is a nice, easy way to accomplish that. Okay, right? Okay, so again, if I go back up here to sequence settings, you'll see that it has just used my clip to kind of set all this stuff here. Right, so let's go back to this tab, sample sequence. And I'm just going to grab just a couple of clips and just throw them in here. So we've got some stuff. Boop. We'll talk about playing and adding clips to our timeline in a different tutorial, but I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the timeline. So my timeline is made up of video tracks and audio tracks. So you'll see that I've got video tracks V1, V2, and V3. That's kind of what I've been given automatically. And I can kind of layer these video tracks on top of each other. So if we just go here and grab the video, I can actually just place this video on top. And of course, it's going to play whichever one is on top is going to kind of be foregrounded, or in this case, kind of be overwrite what I've got on the bottom here. So I've also, similarly, I've got audio tracks 1, 2, and 3. If I need to create more tracks, I can actually just right-click with my mouse in this space, and you'll see that I can add tracks or delete tracks. And it will ask me how many tracks I want to add and where I want to add them to. With audio tracks, it's a little different. Video doesn't usually overlap unless I do something to it. It's going to, of course, it's going to play the video from the uppermost track. With audio tracks, those tend to kind of play all at once. So if I have my dialogue on track 1, and then I put some sound effects on track 2, and I put some music on track 3, those are all going to kind of sort of build and create a sort of a layered soundtrack. I also have a variety of buttons here, which I can use to kind of mute some of the tracks. So like, see this little eyeball here? So if I don't want to see this video, but I actually want to see the one underneath, if I just click on this eyeball, you'll see that, oof, Julie's going to hate me for that one. There we go. That's a little better. So you'll see that when I click on this little eyeball, it will sort of disable this video up here. Likewise, with my audio tracks, I have my solo and mute buttons. When I click on the M or mute, it will mute the track. If I click on S for solo, then it will play the track that is being soloed and mute all of the other tracks. I've also got these little lock buttons here. So if I don't want anything to be done to this track, if I don't want it to move, or if I'm making an edit and I don't want it to be involved in that edit, if I lock down this track, it will stay in place and nothing will be done to it. And there you go. So there's a deep dive into sequences and the timeline panel in Premiere Pro. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another Tutorial Tuesday. And while you're here, check out some of the short films, web series, sketches, and podcasts that we produce. If you have a question about this video, or if you have a topic that you'd like me to cover on another tutorial, leave me a comment down below, and I'll see you on the next Tutorial Tuesday.